question is, what is Labour going to do about it? Dr Bob Seeley, former Conservative MP, joins me now. A very good afternoon to you.
Hi, David, and good afternoon to your listeners and viewers.
Really good to talk to you. So here we go again, 25,000 illegal migrants since Starmer came to power. This year, 1,893. That is 40% higher than in 2022. I'm sure, like you, I'm sick and tired of talking about this. All we are seeing is small boats coming across the channel. We are completely rudderless here. No one is doing anything about it, apart from sticking them all in hotels, and we're paying for it.
I quite agree. Look, I mean, what's the worst thing I think for me now is that the government are now finding a legal pathway for illegals to apply for citizenship. And, you know, this is one of the many things that we closed down. I'm not here to defend the last government's record. In some places it was good, in some places not so good. We tried to get Rwanda in. We should have pulled out the ECHR. We didn't. And I think we all regret doing that, or some of us.
Well, Labour doesn't.
Sorry, I'm talking about the Tories here.
Oh, I see.
We should have done more.
Well, no, Kemi Badenoch doesn't want to pull out, does she?
No, I think she's going to. It's just a question of how we do it, because there are issues with Northern Ireland. But we have to. I mean, the other thing that Kemi says, to be fair, David, is it's not just about the ECHR. You pull out the ECHR, and the same human rights lawyers, the Starmers and the Hermers of this world, will simply go back to various Blairite era laws, like the Human Rights Act, and it's basically use the Human Rights Act rather than the ECHR. So effectively, there is a web of several different laws, as well as the ECHR, that need to be untied. What I would love to see her doing, and I'm sure she will do it in time, is to go to a group of wise experts, a sort of conservative lawyers, and just say, right, how do you unpick all this? And it might just be, David, that the next government, be it Conservative, Reform, or mixture of both, or whatever, if there is a non-Labour government, will introduce very quickly a Great Repeal Act, and we just, within 2 weeks, we scrap a whole bunch of laws that effectively have stopped us governing over the last few years. And if I read in between the lines in what some of the stuff you see in the papers, that's now actually beginning to concern Labour ministers as well, because we don't seem to be able to govern, because every time we try to do stuff, it's challenged in the courts by judicial reviews, by people like Lord Hermer, who seems to spend most of his time not being the Attorney General, but excusing himself, because he seems to have acted for every single enemy of this country, apart from this country itself.
I mean, we saw the illegal migration bill and the dreadful passage through Parliament of that. It was so tortuous. And of course, you know, I will say about the Conservative Party tenure, they had a lot of time to sort this out. They could have repealed some of those laws. And of course, there has been a lot of talk from Reform about having a British Bill of Rights. I think you are right. We need to repeal a lot of these. But surely, as a democratic country, as one of the oldest established countries, we can actually have a legal framework that we make in this country, and we then adhere to it.
Just on the numbers, as I say, I'm not here to defend the last government, but just on the record of it, this became an issue from about 2019 onwards. So this wasn't a massive issue in 2010. The issue then was people getting on Eurostar, and that's pretty much died to death. So we solved that problem. And unfortunately, we then had another problem that came along, the small boats, bang, and then COVID hit us, then the Ukraine war, and frankly, government became sidetracked with other issues. And it is easy to look back with hindsight to say, well, I wouldn't have done this or I wouldn't have done that. But we were too slow to react. But at the same time, David, you know, we had Hong Kong people come in. A lot of people were saying let in Hong Kongers, including myself. And then we had the Ukraine crisis. Some of these numbers of legal migrants pushed up by relatively worthy causes. The issue is then you have people coming in on a care worker visa. They're earning 16 grand a year, and they brought half their family with them.
Well, and also I think Boris Johnson was partly to blame for this. Of course, they relaxed the rules. That we got 745,000 net migrants coming, illegal migrants coming into this country, let alone the illegal migrants. And of course, the thing that really upsets people, and every single day there are more and more examples of this. Today is a Jamaican drug dealer who's avoided deportation because he promised, I will only smoke cannabis, I won't actually sell it. I mean, that's an absolute nonsense. Then we've got a violent Polish serial criminal's deportation being blocked under human rights laws. People all around the country are thinking, this is insane.
You're talking to someone who finds this more painful than most, because I'm thinking, what the hell is happening to our courts? And it seems like large parts of the British state, like the Home Office. Remember when the Home Office was saying that if you watch Michael Portillo's Great British Railway Journeys, that's an indicator that you could be on the far right? Yeah, do you remember that?
I do remember that.
You've
How are
actually
you
got.
far right?
I mean, you've actually got large parts of the state seemingly despising the majority population, which I find unbelievable. And we've got our judges now who are they just scared of the ECHR? Do they buy into this
Is it, so,
garbage?
can I just ask you about that? Because it seems to me it's these lawyers are manipulating the ECHR, and it's the interpretation of that law which they are abusing in many cases.
This is because ECHR and all this sort of human rights framework, which seems to be about everyone's human rights apart from the majority. So if you're a
Yes.
criminal, the human rights system will have an absolute field day with you. But if you want your house protected from burglars, yeah, we're not so interested in that. No, look, I mean, it's appalling. We should have repealed all this stuff, and I hope if we ever get another chance, there are so many of these laws that we've just got to scrap because they prevent ministers and parliament from governing, and one of the purposes of Brexit was to take back control. And
I remember it.
if we're not using that, what was the point? We
Well,
need
well, I would agree. And also, I think we need to look at the black economy as well. There's another story. Deliveroo has sacked more than 100 riders as part of crackdown on illegal migrants. So it seems to me that you've got all these delivery drivers not properly vetted. Of course, they then don't turn up. And weirdly, actually, a friend of mine said he ordered some food and the person who delivered that food was not actually the person that was expected that he was told about on the app. And that they had basically given a responsibility and no one had done any checks.
No, and the thing is, it's worse. If you ask for a female driver and you get some bloke who's an illegal immigrant, that is potentially dangerous.
Absolutely.
And we've seen, I think Alexandra Phillips a couple of weeks ago did this documentary saying about the significant rise of rape and sexual assault in because you've got illegals from deeply misogynistic cultures and countries who are coming over here who are frankly a danger to women. And yet, because we sort of we put this mantle of victimhood on everyone who comes to this country. If you're a refugee, I mean, so many fake asylum claims now, but if you're a refugee, somehow you're a victim, regardless of the moral quality of your character. If you're a criminal, if you're a rapist, if you're somebody who sexually abuses or violently abuses other people. I mean, we seem to have lost our judgment on this. I quite agree with some of your callers.
Can I just ask you, you have an amazing CV. You served in the British Armed Forces from 2008 to 2017. You served in Iraq, Afghanistan, Libya, and the ISIS campaigns. Can I just ask you about Keir Starmer saying, I thought long and hard about this. I will commit British boots to the ground to protect Ukraine. You saw Lord Dannatt saying, hang on a minute, we are very happy to do what we're instructed to do, but you need to support the troops. You actually need to equip us. You need to spend more money on defence. Meanwhile, the Prime Minister says, oh no, we're not spending any more on defence.
Okay, I mean, look, I'm a reservist, so if I get called up to go because
Sure.
I'm a Russian speaker and I have, form in that part of the world, let's put it like that, I'd certainly go. Do I think we should be sending troops in the state that our military was in? No. And without the US backup, without NATO backup, there is zero credibility. And if you have several thousand British troops on the front line, effectively they're Russian hostages. Let's be under no illusion here. Putin is going to carry on this war until he destroys Ukraine. If for any reason he stops at some point this year, and there's no guarantee that the ceasefire will either be called or hold, he is temporarily using it to re-equip his soldiers or to use other forms of violence and other forms of political warfare.
And if you understand that, and I understand that, why don't the politicians understand that?
I don't know. I think because Keir Starmer's maybe taking from the New Labour playbook, and they absolutely abuse the military, the British military, to try to go and solve all the world's problems. Because one, it looked good to wrap themselves in the flag. Blair did it, and I think because they became over reliant on the military, frankly, and I think they're in danger of doing that again. there is a massive difference between Afghanistan and Iraq. These were troubled campaigns, you know. We didn't, you know, fighting counterinsurgency, non-conventional war is a very difficult thing for military forces to do, especially in the age of horrible human rights lawyers of Phil Shiner type, friend of the Attorney General by all accounts. So it is difficult, but to put 10,000 British troops or several thousand British troops on the front line with the Russians, I think is, unless there is NATO and US backup, I think you are absolutely asking for trouble, because this war is not over and Putin will fight it again. And if he's got British troops there, he could very easily use that to really tie our hands in unpleasant and uncomfortable ways, especially since he is now, President Zelensky says he's about to put 150,000, several divisions of Russian troops into Belarus to intimidate Poland, to maybe strike into the Baltic republics as part of some sort of mixed military, non-military offensive. I'm not quite sure, but I think we need to talk. I think we need to think far more carefully about what we're doing there.
And finally, and I'm sorry, I am way over time, but just in terms of where we go from here, President Trump and this deal, this proposed deal that he is doing with Russia, without Zelensky, without Ukraine, is Trump being a fool here? Is he underestimating Putin?
Yes, he is, and he's being absolutely compromised by Putin. I don't know why. I don't know if they've got something on him, or I don't know if he's just, you know, in love with gangsters type politicians because he wants to be some sort of gangster wise guy. Trump is, and you know, I love what Vance was saying last week about woke. I love what they're doing to shut down the corrupt diversity industry in the United States. So I'm not blindly anti-Trump, and I think J.D. Vance is a pretty impressive guy. But I think they are absolutely. I think Trump is being absolutely played by the Russians. The Russians, the main battle space, according to their theories, in the mind. And, you know, why have to defeat your enemy when you can corrupt them and corrupt their decision making? And that is what's happening now. It's a really frightening thing to see. He is absolutely, Trump is playing into Putin's hands, and Putin is dividing the US and Europe. And this is a really dangerous time we live in. So yeah, no, it's not good, and it's actually very bad for all our security, and we're going to have to spend an awful lot more on defence. And even then, without those US guarantees, the threat from Russia is going to become significantly more intense, and I think they're going to try to break NATO and break Western military power in the Baltic or in Moldova or in Poland somewhere in the next few years.
Really good to talk to you. Thank you so much for your time. That's Dr. Bob Seeley there, former Conservative Member of Parliament.